He is running in two primaries, Working Families and Independence Party. And he's also a Democrat.
Good evening. Again, my name is Howard Gerber. I am the Democratic candidate for Town Justice, and I am also running in the Independence and Working Families primaries. I've been the town judge since 2007. I was appointed to one of the four positions that first year when Judge Alfieri was elevated to the county court. It seems I've been following Judge Alfieri most of my career. I interned in the Rockland District Attorney's Office when I was in law school. Actually worked for Judge Alfieri when he was an ADA there. And then I've been following him since. Maybe sometime in the future I'll follow him up to county court, but not at the moment. I did, as I said, I worked in the Rockland DA's office as an intern. I grew up in Rockland. I graduated from Nanuet High School a long time ago, the old high school. And then I went to State University at Geneseo, and I went to law school at Pace over in Westchester. Rockland's always been my home base. In fact, I proposed to my wife and suggested that if she married me and bared me sons and lived in Valley Cottage, that would be a good thing. I have two daughters who I'm very proud of, but she's stuck in Valley Cottage 2 out of 3. And both my daughters informed me today that they will both be on the mock trial team at Nanuet High School, so I guess we created another generation of lawyers. My older daughter is co-captain of the team, and she can do a better cross-examination than I can. But I've been in Rockland most of my life. I am a 30-year member of the Valley Cottage Fire Department. Currently, I'm first assistant chief, and I'm a little tired. The last couple of days, we've been doing a lot of work. There are a lot of people who have problems from the storm. Overall, I think Rockland did pretty well. It could have been a lot worse. There are some tragic situations that we had. Clarkstown has a number of people who are still out of power, but overall it could have been a lot worse. Upstate really had a lot of problems. But I spend a lot of time at the fire department. There is a little bit of overlap with court, but that's part of who I am. I've been doing that for 30 years. I've been doing that longer than I've been a lawyer. But I did spend a lot of time in the district attorney's office. I spent 3 years in the Rockland County District Attorney's Office as an attorney subsequent to being an intern there. And then I went to the Westchester District Attorney's Office where I spent 8 years, and I handled very serious cases, did a number of over 50 trials in county court, serious felony matters. When I left the District Attorney's Office, I opened up a private practice here in Nanuet as well as over in Westchester. I have an office on Main Street on South Middletown Road. And I also have a practice over in Westchester where I still do actually go to court as a practicing attorney. And I have spent most of my career as an attorney in court. Most of what I do is criminal law. I do other types of things, but 90% of my practice is criminal law, being in a criminal courtroom. I didn't do a lot of civil courtroom work, and that's something that I've learned since I've been on the bench handling small claims cases. And those are the cases that people get most worked up over in my courtroom. Right now we have a problem with court security, and the town board is trying to resolve that problem. But we really don't need court security on criminal days. We know who the bad people are. They're usually accompanied by officers, and they're usually wearing bracelets. But on small claims days, I've actually had 2 people go to the hospital because they've worked themselves up. And that's the kind of thing that being a practicing attorney is something that comes in handy. Sometimes my fire department experience comes in handy in the courtroom. But it's working out the disputes between neighbors that has been a learning experience and is probably where people like us end up in court, people like you. A dispute between neighbors that's not criminal, a dispute with a business where you come and try to work it out, have your day in court, small claims court, you can sue somebody without an attorney for up to $3,000. And I've had people get really worked up over $50. As I said, I've had 2 people that have left my courtroom on stretchers. One person was suing over $600, and I had been a judge for about 3 weeks when I was down on the floor doing first aid. So as I said, the fire department training sometimes comes in handy. She ultimately won her case, but it's working those things out, trying to deal with the people who don't normally come to court. One of the reasons that security is a problem on those days is because criminal days are bad people acting on their best behavior. Civil day is when you have really good people not necessarily on their best behavior, and they're getting very emotional, and it's trying to work those things out. The little speech that I give at the beginning of court on civil days is suggesting very strongly that the people try and work it out themselves, because if I have to work it out, somebody's going home unhappy. Half the people who I make a decision on think I made the wrong decision. The other half think I made the right decision. But if they reach the decision themselves, and if I can help that along, mediate that a little bit, they'll probably go home happier. That's what I try and do, is work with the people to get things done. That's on small claims court, that's on civil days. Most of what we do is criminal, and most of what I've done is criminal law. I've spent 80% of my time as a lawyer in a courtroom. And I think that's what's important for a judge, to know how to do a trial, to know how to run a calendar, and to make sure that things get done, that justice is served. And it's not necessarily a race to get it done. So I take my experience from being a prosecutor, from being a defense attorney, from having appeared as a litigant in small claims court, and apply that all to what we do every day. So if anybody has any questions about me, I can answer those questions. Judges aren't allowed to talk about issues because then I couldn't decide the issue. But if there's any questions about how we do things in court or anything about me, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Yes?
I have a question. How would you differentiate yourself from another judge or your opponent, primary? It's hard to, for me at least, how do I judge who's going to make it?
How do you judge who should be the judge? And that's the problem with judicial races, because all I can do is tell you about me. I can tell you about my involvement in the community, how much time I spend pumping people's houses out, because I don't get paid for that. Yes, I do get paid to be a judge. I think as far as some of the other judges, well, let me tell you what the #1 complaint about me is. I spend too much time in court. Everybody complains that Judge Gerber spends too much time on all the cases, until they're up there with their case. Spend too much time with your case, spend too much time with your case, but when you get to me, I want the judge to spend the time with my case. So on the days that I'm scheduled to be in court, I'm there all day. And I can tell you that most of the other judges aren't. I'm there on days that I'm not scheduled to be there. That's with regard to the other judges in my court, other judges elsewhere. The biggest difference between me and many of the other judges in the state is that I do have an active local court practice because I have an office in Westchester. I'm not allowed to appear in Rockland County in front of most of the judges. There are some weird rules, and suffice it to say they're weird rules. I can appear in Westchester, I can appear in Orange. I know what it's like to have to sit in court and be somewhere else. I know what it's like to try and work cases out and to get plea dispositions from the district attorney's office. I know what it's like to be pressed for time, but I also know that my client wants his day in court, and the judge should be listening to what I'm saying. Most of the judges in the state of New York do not have private practices dealing with mostly criminal law. Many of the judges in this county are not practicing criminal defense attorneys. They may be bankruptcy attorneys, they may be real estate attorneys, but they don't sit in a courtroom worrying about the other 4 courtrooms that they have to be in. They don't have to do trials, and they're not familiar with the laws that we handle in court every day. In fact, in New York State, most of the judges are not lawyers. Once you get out of the metropolitan New York area, it's not a requirement, #1, for a judge in a village or town court to be a lawyer. Once you get into upstate New York, probably the next most populous profession represented on the bench are retired New York State troopers. They have some legal training, but their legal training is limited to, they know what the penal law is, they know what the criminal procedure law is that applies to the cases that they're working on, but they don't know what goes on in the courtroom. They may have a lot more street sense and know what justice requires, but they don't have that training. The state of New York requires that they go to, we all have to go to judge school. They actually have to take a test. Every year, they have to pass the test or they can't continue to be a judge. If you're a lawyer judge, then you have to take the class every year, and basically it's continuing legal education, and they cover subjects that we deal with on a daily basis, but you don't have to pass a test. And I sit there in the classes. Sometimes I cringe when some of the questions that the judges ask, because they've never practiced that kind of law. Bankruptcy almost never comes up in my courtroom. Occasionally it does, and now maybe a little bit more than it did before with foreclosures and businesses going under, and there may be some bankruptcy component to it. But on a daily basis, you have to know how to write a search warrant, or whether the search warrant is properly written by the police officers or the district attorney. You have to know what rights the defendant has and how to preserve those rights. You have to know the rules of evidence and conduct a trial. I've done 50 felony trials as a prosecutor. I haven't done that many as a defense attorney, because you don't get the opportunity. As a prosecutor, you're doing a lot of trials. As a private defense attorney, I tell my clients, you know, I think I'm really good with the rules of evidence, but it really doesn't make a difference if I'm good with the rules of evidence. It only makes a difference if the person sitting up in the front wearing the robes knows the rules of evidence. That's the practical. And you make decisions. I've been reversed a couple of times, but most of the cases I've dealt with as a judge have been upheld on appeal. That's not necessarily the test. On a criminal case, you don't get appealed on dismissals or not guilty verdicts.
Thank
So
you.
it's my experience in the courtroom is really what it comes down to. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. Anybody has questions?